When you hear the word introvert, what's the very first thing that actually comes to mind? For a lot of people it's just this picture of someone who hates socializing. You know? Like someone who avoids people at all costs, and just hides in their room all weekend. Society really loves to paint us with this single antisocial brush. But what if I told you that the whole loner stereotype is just wrong, or at least completely incomplete? Psychology actually tells us a really different story. There isn't just one way to be an introvert. Actually, there are 4 distinctly different types, and depending on which one you are, your need to just step away and go AFK from society looks completely different. Some introverts are actually incredibly social. Others are just kind of trapped in their own heads. So today, we're gonna explore all 4. Pay close attention because by the end of this, you might actually realize you've been misunderstanding your own personality your entire life. Alright? So type 1, the social introvert. This is the type that really confuses extroverts. Social introverts don't hate people. In fact, they deeply value connection, and they actually love spending time with others. But there's a catch. They thrive in very small, carefully chosen groups. They want those deep, meaningful conversations with just 1 or 2 close friends. If you invite them to a quiet coffee shop, they might actually be the most talkative person in the room. But the exact moment you drop them into a massive party or, like, a loud networking event, their social battery dies instantly. They have zero interest in shouting over loud music to make small talk with strangers. If you find yourself perfectly happy hanging out with your chosen few, but absolutely dreading large crowds, you're probably a social introvert. But what if your withdrawal from the world isn't really about the crowd at all? That brings us to type 2, the thinking introvert. If the social introvert is worried about the size of the group, the thinking introvert is just focused inward. This type isn't necessarily scared of social events. They're just incredibly distracted by their own mind. Have you ever been sitting with a group of people and someone suddenly asks, "Hey, are you okay?" You're being really quiet. You weren't upset. You weren't feeling shy. You were just completely lost in a daydream, or maybe analyzing some complex idea, or literally designing a whole new universe in your head. Thinking introverts have this incredibly rich, imaginative inner world. They're introspective, creative. They don't withdraw out of fear. They just find their own thoughts infinitely more entertaining than the conversation happening around them. But while the thinking introvert retreats into a safe mental space, our next type retreats for a much more painful reason. Type 3, the anxious introvert. This is where that classic stereotype usually comes from, but it's so important to understand the why behind it. Anxious introverts seek solitude not because they just prefer being alone, but because socializing causes them genuine physical stress. They often struggle with this deep lack of confidence. They are acutely aware of how they're being perceived all the time, which leads to this constant exhausting hypervigilance when they're around others. And the hardest part? The anxiety doesn't just magically stop when the party's over. If you're an anxious introvert, you probably know the absolute torment of lying in bed at 2 a.m. agonizing over a slightly awkward thing you said literally 5 years ago. You overanalyze your words, convinced you messed up. Solitude isn't just a preference for this type. It's a necessary shield against the overwhelming pressure of being perceived. And finally, we have type 4, the restrained introvert. You can kinda think of this type as the slow warmer. They operate at a very deliberate, measured pace. They aren't necessarily anxious, and they aren't lost in a daydream. They just need time. Like, if you're the kind of person who needs a full hour of absolute uninterrupted silence after waking up before anyone is even allowed to speak to you, yeah, you might be a restrained introvert. They like to observe a situation completely before they jump in. They will never be the first person to volunteer or start a debate. They prefer to hang back, assess the room, and just gather their energy. To the outside world, they can seem guarded, maybe even aloof, but in reality, they're just protecting their energy and moving at their own steady rhythm. Human beings are so complex. you're rarely going to fit perfectly into just one box. I mean, you might be 60% social introvert but have days where your 40% anxious introvert totally takes over. The most important thing to remember here is that there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. Whether you need a small group, a quiet space to think, a break from the anxiety, or just a really slow morning, your need to go AFK from the world is completely valid. So I'd really love to hear from you guys. Which of the 4 types actually resonated with you the most? Are you a specific mix? Let me know your exact combination in the comments. If this video made you feel even just a little bit more understood, consider hitting the like button and subscribing for more deep dives into the psychology of introversion. Stay quiet, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.